So I'll start by reading something that somebody actually shared in our Facebook group for this journey within that we have on Facebook. Somebody shared this text of Ram Dass speaking about the Gita, and he said, and I actually just copied the text because I thought it was really nice. I can't remember who shared it, so if you're on the line, thank you for sharing that. It was really nice. It was on the Facebook group. In the Bhagavad Gita, there are two injunctions that are very clear about action. One is, do not be identified with the actor. Krishna is saying to Arjuna, you are a warrior, and this is a dharmic war. You are going to fight. Go fight it. But don't think that you are the fighter. It's really me, God, that's doing it. You are just an instrument in it. So don't get so caught up. Don't let your ego run away. Don't think that you're doing it. So the first injunction is don't be identified with the actor. In other words, let your mind pull back from identifying with the doing. We are all doing. Like the common thing in this culture is, what are you doing? We ask, what are we doing? What are you doing? What do you do? Hi, what do you do? See, doing this is identification. And we're constantly sucking each other to identifying with the doer. I worked all day. I made love. I ate. I walked. I did. It's really true because when we're in an event somewhere and we meet someone new or introduce, hey, what do you do? It's very quickly, the question after you know what's your name, the next question is what do you do? The other way of looking at it, and it's different, it's a critical shift of consciousness, is I am, and there is doing. It's a different place, like your heart is beating, but you're not beating your heart. You're not saying beat, damn, beat, damn, beat, beat, beat. I'd like to talk to you, but I'm busy doing. Excuse me. Beat, 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 beat. So you're not. It's all going on automatically, so to speak, or base brain, or whatever you want to call it. So we're talking about non-identification with being the actor is the first component. Now think of all the times in your life that you do, and then imagine them happening because they are. Like when you drive a car, you are identified with being the doer. You are usually thinking about something else while you are driving. You are not being the driver. Now take the next injunction. The next injunction is be not attached to the fruits of action. Like if you are a parent raising a child, first of all, don't be identified with the fact that you're raising the child. You are a being. All of this is happening because it's appropriate that is happening. You are resting in your own being, and there is doing happening. You are being careful of the biological safety of the child and the love and so on. The other thing is how the child turns out is how the child turns out. Your attachment to how the child is going to turn out is going to affect the way you act. You did the act as impeccably as you can because that is your dharma. It is your duty. It is your role to play. You find yourself in that unique karmic predicament. Your karma defines your dharma. So I think he really is, speaking something on the Bhagavad Gita's teachings there. And the first being us as the doer. The second being attached to the outcomes. And these are two very powerful central themes that cause us a lot of suffering. And I think it goes back to the last verse that we read as we came to the Gita. So, the very last verse in in chapter 2, verse 46, what is use for small ponds of water when pure water flows from every direction? Similarly, what is the use of the Vedas for a learned person who knows Brahman? I just love this. If we have that state of love flowing through our life, then all of these other mantras and spiritual techniques and sacred texts and books and work and everything, we don't even need them because we are that. Now, that's not to say that we are that already. we can we can use all of these sacred texts, and I love to. And even this reminds me. It constantly keeps reminding me of who I am and who we are and where we should be. And so, what I would say is that this is a profound message here by Krishna that ultimately an enlightened being doesn't require any of it. We are that state of love already. And this is all for reminding ourselves and removing the dust from our hearts. All of the spiritual practice is about that. Polishing the mirror of our hearts. You have a right to perform your duty, but you're not entitled to the results. Never allow the fruits of an action to be your motivation, and never be attached to inaction. You have the right to perform your duty, so we should perform action. Krishna is pro-action. The Gita is pro-action. It's telling you in action you will thrive, you'll come alive, you can achieve your duty and purpose in life. It's not, but do not be overly attached to the results of those actions. Perform your actions as an offering to God and Guru and to the world and working for the welfare of the world, but not for selfish endeavor. And interestingly, Krishna puts in there at the end of the verse, do not also be attached to inaction. Now, my view here is a little bit controversial, and I don't really share too many controversies. I think here, Krishna is having a little dig at the sannyasins, the people that go off into the world and, kind of give up. Because in this state, he's speaking to Arjuna because he wants him to fight. He wants him to engage in battle, the Dharmic war. But he's saying don't be attached to inaction. That means don't just go off and do nothing. Don't just hide away. Like being passive and not doing something is also not an option. We could take the political environment that we're in at the moment, where when you get very strong voices and very kind of almost dictatorial actors, sometimes we can be frozen to not do anything. It's like, my God, we can't say anything in this environment because, like it's too uh, dangerous, or we shouldn't say anything. Whereas actually, the Gita will implore us to do the right thing wherever we can, and to stand for goodness, and to stand for compassion and love for all beings, and be a voice for the right thing. And yeah, I remember Dr. Nicholas Sutton once telling me about the early 80s in the UK, where there was quite a lot difficult, time where racism was quite high back then. There was a lot of, street protests. We had the BMP, and there were a lot of, kind of shaven head skinheads, they call them in the UK, used to go out on the street and protest against any, people, and kind of strike fear in people's hearts. And he used to go out and speak to them and tell them why it was wrong that they were doing this. And, as somebody from Birmingham, I found that quite inspiring, that he would go out and spend his Sunday to go to visit a protest to try and convince a few people that this is not a good way to behave and not nice what you're doing. And he said that he did it out of an act of dharma, and an act of that this is just the right thing to do as a human being, and I should do that as my duty. So I think it's not about not acting, and it's not about the results. It's about doing it out of a sense of duty, out of a sense of love. So we are love, the act is love, and the beneficiary is also love. So it's God, offering God to God. Become fixed in the discipline of yoga and perform your duty. Abandon attachment and become equal in success or failure. O conqueror of wealth, such a balance is called yoga. We have a definition of yoga here by Krishna. Very beautiful. When you perform your duty, you're not attached to the results. You're equanimous in the eyes of success or failure. You achieve a state called yoga. And so in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says, Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the balancing of the movements of the mind. So when the mind is calm or the mind is still, here Krishna is giving the definition that yoga is karma, yoga is action, but performed without attachment and without being equal in success or failure. So to come back to Ram Dass's definition of bringing up a child, we obviously want good results for our child. We want them to succeed in their exams when we're helping them with their homework or studying. But ultimately, our job as a parent or as an individual is just to do the best that we can do in our dharma to help them. And ultimately, the result will be their input, their karma, their ability to absorb those teachings and that guidance and that love in the best way. So, ultimately to not be swayed in success or failure, but just to have that stoic sense of balance in the work that we're doing. O Dhananjaya, action performed with discipline of intellect is far superior to ordinary action. This first line, quite significant, separating normal action from intentional yogic action that we're talking about here. So really, we are getting into karma yoga here, the yoga of action, the yoga that every single one of us do in the world. We cannot avoid it. So he's saying the normal action that we'll do. Just to give you, maybe I could use an example. Yesterday at the warehouse or the Go Dharmic offices, we had huge numbers of boxes to move. And that boxes can be, we have got these, I can see probably a few of the team smiling. They were on yesterday having to pick up these huge boxes and move them around of food, of cups, of boxes of plates, all dusty. They've been in storage and we need to move them all around. Now that can be just an action of just moving it from A to B, or it can be karma yoga. Ram, Ram. Next box, offering that, just almost with the joy of the monkeys developing a bridge from India to Lanka, placing each floating rock on the ocean as if it with Ram's name, so it floats to the other side. So it can just be action. It can be cumbersome. It can be uh, just a normal, ordinary task, or it can be karma yoga. It can be an offering, a divine offering, and that for me is blissful action when all work becomes blissful. O Dhananjaya, action performed with discipline of intellect is far superior to ordinary action. Seek shelter in enlightenment. Wretched are those who are motivated by results alone. I'm just going to look at the Sanskrit there. Sangam tyag dhananjaya uchchayate. Yeah. So basically, it's actually quite sad if we're only just obsessed with the results. We're here for a journey. And most of the time, it's the journey that we all love, the journey that we appreciate, the journey that we enjoy, that we miss once it's gone. I was speaking with a friend who's a very successful cricketer, and one of the things he said was, "Oh, I wouldn't wish fame upon my worst enemy. We can't even go out and grab a coffee." And it was just so poignant because, so many people would admire him and look up to him and want to be like that. And there is him, he's just like, he just wants to have a coffee with his family in the park and, the sun hit their faces and walk their dog if they have, I don't know, just an ordinary things that everybody can enjoy, but they just simply cannot enjoy those simple things. And so I feel like there's something in this about if our offering is really pure, if our intention is true, good intention, right intention, doing this as a service, as an offering to improve life for us and others around us, then that is good. But if our intention is for some particular result where, we are going to have some great achievement from or something like that, then actually that is what we call in previous weeks we discussed as poisoning the prasad. Let's not poison the prasad. We're doing so much nice prasad. Don't poison it. Make it pure. Offer it out of love. Keep it nice. Seek shelter in enlightenment. Those whose intellects are disciplined rid themselves of both good and evil actions in this world. Therefore, strive for the discipline of yoga, which is the perfection of all work. I think we need to be a bit careful with understanding this verse, verse 50. Those whose intellects are disciplined rid themselves of both good and evil actions in this world. Therefore, strive for the discipline of yoga. I think the emphasis is not on not doing good acts. It's certainly not that. What it is the attachment to the results of things that go good or bad. We must be equanimous in that, result state. So helping us remain balanced. That's the objective here. Um, and that is the perfection of work. Very difficult to do, isn't it? Because as soon as we're doing anything, we think about the result of that thing. And life is kind of built in that way, very much so in the capitalistic world, because you're always trying to, work for a desired result. So it's almost flipping itself on its head and saying, now just do the action, which is the right action to do. So I often think about many people who might be thinking about products that they want to build to sell in the world, and might be producing a product that they think can make a lot of money, but actually it's the profitability is the biggest driver uh, in that business model, rather than what is best for the world, what is good for all living beings, what is good for nature, what is good for increasing compassion and reducing loneliness and bringing people together. I think loneliness is one of the biggest problems of our time. Um, Not only with the elderly and isolated, but also with young people who are stuck in front of screens and don't see their friends or play in the park as much as people previously did. And because it's not profitable to tackle that in a good way, it loses attention. So I feel like Krishna's saying acting for out of good intention without strict desires is the real way. The wise whose intellects are disciplined and who are freed from the bonds of birth give up attachment to the fruits of work. They attain a state which is free from suffering. They attain a state which is free from suffering. Freedom from suffering. For me, every religious or spiritual school in the world is trying to achieve one thing: freedom from suffering. Isn't it? Like if we talk about any tradition of the world, a religion, one common feature. The end goal is to be free of suffering. If we describe heaven, heaven is a place where there's no suffering from Abrahamic perspective. If we look at Buddhist nirvana, freedom from suffering. If we look at moksha, the state of no suffering. So every religion, every school is trying to achieve a state of no suffering. So why then, if there's a homeless person who's freezing cold, sitting on the street, we don't relieve the suffering right there? It should be the religious and spiritual duty of everybody who is considered trying to achieve a lack of freedom from suffering to work to reduce suffering for all living beings and our own suffering and being kind and loving to our own self. So if we are considering heaven or enlightenment as without suffering, the one common feature, then that actually has to be starting with ourself, that we shouldn't make ourselves suffer. Not be too hard on ourselves. Give self-love, because love is the ultimate description of who we are. Unconditional love. And so for me, that here, freedoms from suffering, every spiritual path wants freedom from suffering. And my view is that that is the ultimate goal, that every person should try to self-reflect as well as um, reduce wherever we can. If somebody is feeling um, lonely, it's not necessary that you need to tell them anything, teach them anything, give them anything. Just the presence of the heart, being with that person, can warm them and make that wonderful. And I often think our food distributions at Go Dharmic, it's not about the food that we serve. It's actually the presence of being there automatically relieves suffering. That somebody knows that somebody else is there. Imagine a homeless person who's sitting on the street and their hand is just held up, and thousands of people walk past them every day. It's actually not the fact that they haven't received food or money. It's the most disheartening thing is that they've been just lonely and ignored. And if you strike a conversation with that person and talk to them, you'll immediately see some lift in warmth, a bit of humanity and recognition and appreciation. I've seen it so many times of the fact that you're giving them your presence, that you're giving them that time. When your intelligence has crossed beyond the tangle of delusion, you will become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. Again, finding that mind where the staff that we spoke about of Ram Nam, Ram, Ram, Ram. You have a staff, things go well, things go bad, things are okay. We just continue our work. When you have that indifference to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard, you you cross beyond the tangle of delusion. Beyond the tangle of delusion. When your intelligence stands firm, opposed to what has been heard, you will attain the discipline of yoga. So beyond advice, beyond sacred texts, beyond all of the things, we just have a mind that can remain stable and equanimous. Like Krishna will describe it later as a lamp in a windless place or a candle in a windless place. So Krishna has been really giving some profound teachings there, up to verse 53 on karma yoga. And Arjuna will go on to speak, but before Arjuna goes on to speak, I want to read something from Moved by Love. This text, just a small excerpt from Vinoba Bhave for you. It's a really beautiful book. And it's about what we are doing here. Like, why are we here? Why are we exploring this Gita? All of us who are here, what are we exploring the Gita for? What is sacred text for? What is the use case? And I found it quite useful and interesting to share here. And it's section 16 where he talks about studying, exploring text, teaching, sharing it, and writing. So he's exploring like this practice, what we are doing, svadhyaya, study and self-exploration, as well as the Upanishad gives us a command: follow truth, study and teach the scriptures, practice peace of mind, control of thought, and study and teach the scriptures, master the senses, and study and teach the scriptures, master, honor and serve the guest, and study and teach the scriptures. Along with doing all of the duties, go study and teach the scriptures. This is in the Taittiriya Upanishad, he's referencing. The scriptures themselves use an image of a casket in which all human duties are contained like peas in a pod. Beyond encapsulating walls of the study and the teaching of sacred texts, every duty should be carried out within this enclosing casket. For myself, the commandment means appeal for gifts of land and gifts of villages, and study and teach the scriptures. Build a Shanti center. So this is Vinoba Bhave. Remember I spoke about how he walked barefoot around the whole of India, and he appealed to people to give the land up to the landless. And he gathered this land the size of Scotland and got it contributed to the poorest people, and then got them trained in how to farm that land and help uplift those people. So he said, for me, he's rereading the Upanishad in his own sense. He said, I should appeal for gifts of land and give gifts to the villagers and study and teach the scriptures. He said, I should build a Shanti Sena. Shanti Sena means peace army. Shanti is peace. Sena is army. I should build a peace army and study and teach the scriptures. For me, Go Dharmic is a peace army. Love all, feed all, serve all. Doing that work. Shanti, we are a Shanti Sena, peace army. I should study and teach the scriptures. Work for village-orientated khadi. Khadi is a produce made in India. Some of you may know it. It was a homespun fiber that was used for clothing so that the poor could make their own clothes. They didn't need to think. That is what I've been doing. The duty of study and teaching the scriptures have never been far from my mind, and I owe much to those great souls who commanded me to follow this principle. I have been a student all my life. I have never ceased to be one, and a man who has a taste for study can never give it up. He must seek knowledge of many kinds: spiritual knowledge, scientific knowledge, knowledge of the principles of health, knowledge of the principles of medicine, and so on. And that was my aim. I studied wholeheartedly as any university student and went on studying all throughout my pilgrimages. My education began after a fashion at Gogode, but most of it was acquired during the 11 years I spent at Baroda. During this period, I literally read thousands of books. Not that I made a complete study of every book, but there were some that I studied thoroughly, some that I committed to memory, but others I read in a more cursory fashion. And at that time, it was the books of the Marathi saints which influenced me greatly. After my mother died, I began to study the Vedas. That was in 1918. In 1969, I completed the task. So it's from 1918 to 1969, it took him to study the Vedas. During those 50 years, I studied the Vedas, the Upanishads, and other Sanskrit spiritual books. In this way, I read a great deal of spiritual and religious literature. I regard the Vedas, however, as the quintessence of them all. And this is somebody who's written wonderful books on Islamic texts, on Christian texts, on great treatises. He's a great scholar. He knew Arabic and Persian and Sanskrit and Tamil and Hindi and English and, so many languages, and was a great scholar. Now in 1975, I am an old man, and in my old age, following the bidings of Shankaracharya, I take refuge in two books alone, the Bhagavad Gita and the Vishnu Sahasranama. Day and night, sleeping, the Sahasranama is the 1,000 names of Lord Vishnu are always with me. Thus, in the first stage of life, I was influenced by saints. In the second stage of life, it was the Vedas. And now for me, the Gita and the Vishnu Sahasranama. What lies ahead must surely be freedom from all books altogether. So ultimately, it comes back to that if or teaching that we have in the Gita verse. Very, very profound wisdom teacher, Vinoba Bhave. We we're at a very important juncture there, verse 53 of the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna ends his teaching at that point. Arjuna will go on to ask a different question now. And in the next session, we'll explore something very profound. What are the characteristics of this person that you describe? How does he eat? How does he live? How do we talk? How should we act in the world? What are the characteristics of this enlightened being or realized being? And the term that's used in the Gita is called Stita Pragya. And Stita Pragya is one who is situated within the self. What is that person? How does he look like? How does he talk to his friends? How does he engage with the world? What does he do in the world? Arjuna is going to ask those kind of questions. So I don't want to go into this into that in this session because we've explored at some detail karma yoga today. It was all about karma yoga. But just finally, before we do that, there is I think we'll pause it there. I think it's right to pause on that moment where we've talked about karma yoga, we've talked about exploring how we can remain balanced while serving in the world, and ultimately, if I think what does that mean? It's Hanumanji. It's serve like Hanuman, serve like Hanuman served. That Maharaji would say, Neem Karoli Baba would say to people, you serve like Hanuman served. So always I have that in my mind that there's an exemplar of the Gita there ready. So as we go into the next session on exploring the characteristics of one who is a Stita Prajna, I think it's a good place to pause on what karma yoga is.